streaming or no?
I am,
Cool.
but we aren't live yet. The live stream says starting soon, and it looks like we got a whole 3 people have been sitting around for a little while. So we're recording here. Zoom is recording, so that's my main thing, and then I will transition over, and we'll be in. So I've
Perfect.
got time
Perfect.
slated until about the top of the hour. If we go a little over, that's fine with me.
I'll
As
go as
soon
long as
as
you want.
cool,
Whatever
got
you
it.
want. How do I sound? Good? Fine?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And also, dude, I dropped my one earbud in the coffee this morning, so only one is working. So you're coming in mono. Just like, what a goober.
Uh,
Yeah, never a dull moment. All right, here we go. And gotta make sure that's unmuted and this is unmuted. And all right, hello and welcome. With me today is Ryan. So Ryan, the way I like to start is to hand it off to you so that you can introduce yourself. One, because I'm lazy, and two, it helps you nail your own introduction however you like. Now, the focus of this whole show is talking with elite performers, people that are at the top of their game. So, one thing I've learned from all the conversations over the years is that you're going to be overly modest. This is not time for that. So, talk yourself up. Like you've done a lot of cool stuff, a lot of things that you've put a lot of effort into. So, introduce yourself and we'll get started.
yeah, Jonathan, thanks you first and foremost for having me join you. This is awesome, and I'm such a big fan of yours, and I've really appreciated just watching kind of your career take off in your life. But so my name's Ryan Shekell, and I am the host of a podcast, Every Breath Counts podcast. And the reason I named my podcast Every Breath Counts is kind of my backstory. So I'll give you the rundown of my backstory. I grew up very just idyllic childhood in a suburb of Rochester, New York, which, by the way, is not anywhere near New York City. It's
Oh,
way
it's
up
just right in the
by
suburbs,
Buffalo.
right?
It's just the suburbs of the city. Absolutely. It's funny because anytime I talk to anyone, they're like, "Oh, New York, I love the city," and I'm like, "Well, it's a 6 hour drive," but yeah.
It's a
So
lot bigger state than anybody ever realizes.
we almost never feel like we're a part of New York City. It's two different. Just it's like a different country from the city. So I grew up in Rochester, New York, and I had a very idyllic childhood. Right, I had my parents raised me together. We had a house. I have a brother. We had a dog. You know, quintessential suburban childhood. I grew up playing sports like basketball and baseball, and just all sorts of fun kid activities. And getting to the Every Breath Counts, I grew up with what a lot of people, my doctor specifically, diagnosed as asthma, athletic induced asthma. I'd cough a little bit growing up. And when I was playing basketball and running around a lot, I'd have like a little coughing fit. Not a big deal, just coughed. And I also found it very difficult to gain weight. When I graduated high school, I was 6'3", 153 pounds. I was very skinny. So
Wow.
they thought I was just lactose intolerant, which was some stomach issues I had, not a big deal. Well, I grew up taking some medication for asthma and trying to avoid chocolate milk as much as I could, which was inevitably impossible since it's one of my favorite things to consume. And I got to high school and I was performing well in sports and I was having again, idyllic high school experience, girlfriend, friends, everything was good. And I ended up performing well enough in baseball to earn a scholarship to play baseball in college. Well, when I went to get my physical to go to college and play baseball, I had a new doctor and she looked at my chart and she said, this sounds a lot like something I read about in medical school. I'd like to send you in for a test. So sure, I'm 18 years old. I'm on top of the world at this point. Nothing crazy going on. I'm going to go play baseball at a small little school. Like, I got a girlfriend, okay. And I go get this test at a hospital, and the test results come back, and I'm diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And cystic fibrosis is a crazy, weird, unique disease. There's only 70,000 people in the world that have it. And what it is, it's a chronic, fatal lung disease that affects your lungs and your pancreas. And the way that it manifests itself in people is that it will eventually, over time, kind of fill your lungs with mucus, making it incredibly difficult to breathe. And you will eventually die from it. So when I was diagnosed at 18 years old with cystic fibrosis, I remember that phone call vividly, receiving the news from my doctor, and I was sitting at my kitchen counter, and I said, "Okay, well, I'm fine. Like I feel okay. What's this mean for me?" And she said, "Ryan, the average lifespan for someone with cystic fibrosis is 30 years old." And I was 18. I was thinking, "Jeez, I'm more than halfway through that. What's going on?" And it was just this gut wrenching news to me. And I kind of thought to myself, well, you know what? To an extent, I'm going to refuse to believe this. I feel okay, and I think I'm going to be fine. So I said, well, doc, what about what about having a family? And I mentioned my childhood because one of my goals as a kid was I wanted to grow up and have a family to have the same childhood I had. I wanted to love my kids and coach them in baseball and do all the amazing things that the male role models that I had, my grandfather and my father did for me, and the love that my mother had, and marry someone that would love my kids like that. And they said, Ryan, the other thing with cystic fibrosis is most men that have it, 99%, have absence of the vas deferens and can't have biological children. And at that point, I was just heartbroken. So that's really where kind of my journey began to where I am today. And in reflecting on my experience, I've realized that I think I have a mindset that has really helped myself, but I think a lot of other people achieve massive success in their life. And I like to call it delusional optimism. And I think that I had a feeling in my mind that no matter what I was being told, the experts, the doctors, anyone in my life that told me that I was not going to achieve massive success in my life, disregard that opinion. Not true. I had enough confidence in myself to understand that while I may not be skilled enough at anything, smart enough, strong enough, I had the relentless work ethic and ability to pivot and make things happen, that I was going to overcome anything that was put in front of me. And ultimately, I was going to beat this disease that I was just diagnosed with. And here I am now, 38 years old. I just turned 38. I have built a massive management career in the medical device industry. I manage a large geographic area with a number of reps underneath me. I oversee a $30 million territory selling orthopedic devices. I have achieved massive success in sports. I played 4 years of college baseball. I did go on to play baseball. I ended up getting looked at for to be drafted, and ultimately chose to pursue a career instead. And most recently, one of the coolest things that's happened, and I know I'm just kind of rambling on here, but this past year there was a new medication that was released to really help people with cystic fibrosis, and it's this novel medication that actually works as a gene mutation medication. And what it did was it actually reversed a lot of my lung damage. So when I was diagnosed, I had 70% lung function, which is lower than COPD. It's like a chronic smoker. And when I was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, when I started this medication, my lung function was down in the 30%, 40% range, which is when they started talking about lung transplant. And it immediately shot back up into the 60s, 70%. And I was able to run a 50-kilometer ultra marathon with 70% lung function and cystic fibrosis at 38 years old when I was supposed to be dead.
There's so much to dig into here, right? Because, yeah, that is a whole laundry list of things you shouldn't be able to do with everything you've done. just kind of go, nope, nope, nope. I'm going to do all those things. So I want to kind of rewind mostly to the beginning of kind of getting that news, right? You're 18, you're the most energetic you're going to be in your whole life, that kind of a thing, and then get the phone call that, oh yeah, you've got a midlife crisis right now, right? So that decision of going, yeah, I'm going to be delusionally, obstinately optimistic. How long did it take for that to show up? Right? Were you going through the 5 stages of grief and it was just denial first and then bargaining second, that kind of a thing? Or was that your instinct and then you realized later that was what you had been doing without it being a conscious thing? Was that a conscious process? Right? Like, kind of walk me through getting that phone call and then coming to terms with it.
So I don't even know what the stages of grief are. So I don't want to answer that I was or was not going through the stages of grief. And that's probably a terrible answer. But so I don't know what the stages of grief are. So I'm going to preface it with that. I have a belief, and I have a belief that you have to practice overcoming adversity. And it's important because I think success is something you learn to a degree. And some people, are lucky and things happen. Um, but I was fortunate as a child to put myself or be put into situations where I learned to overcome adversity and be successful. And I think, sports was a big part of that. I think sports is incredibly important, especially for a young boy, to fail over and over and over again and learn that it's possible to succeed even though failure is the first thing that you experience. I think that's important. But I also think that the correlation between effort and success is is direct. And I think once you realize that, I think it unlocks this realm of possibility in your mind. So once you've practiced overcoming adversity, I think you're open to the idea that anything is possible. Anything is possible. Now, I will say, look, there's always doubt that creeps in. There's always doubt that creeps in. And part of being delusionally optimistic is that the odds are stacked against you. So I think there has to be a realization that failure is possible. Otherwise, it's just delusion. It's not. I don't think it's truly like a delusional optimism. So when I was diagnosed, I think I'd been through a lot already in terms of just, I didn't grow up rich. I didn't have everything I wanted. I had to work for a lot. I started working early. I was a receptionist at Sport Clips, I think it was my first job, and I worked in a dark room in Kodak. And I understood that through hard work and discipline and perseverance that you can manifest like a life that you wanted. So I just said, you know what? I am going to translate that into whatever's in front of me. And I didn't have that realization when I was diagnosed. It was just I think it was almost like a naivete of just, I'm 18, I feel okay. This can't be true. And I'll apply the principles that I know to make sure that it's not.
Makes sense. And there's a really, really big lesson in the asthma. And like, did you have an inhaler and you just used an inhaler every once in a while just when
Yeah.
it would come up?
Yeah, I mean, I had a rescue inhaler. It's albuterol is like the big rescue inhaler that they give kids with asthma, right? And
Hmm.
I did have it, and honestly, it didn't do much. It helped a little. I never felt like it really helped me all that much anyway. I just kind of did what I needed to do. And one of the best things, I'm grateful that I wasn't diagnosed earlier. Now, would my lungs be a little bit better if I was diagnosed at birth or 5 years old? Like, yeah, I would have had a lot more medication flowing through my veins, through my childhood. But I wouldn't have experienced maybe the failures that I was able to experience early on, because I think I would have either been coddled by my parents or myself. I may have been scared to try something, understanding that there may be negative consequences to it. And I truly believe that you have to experience as much as possible so that you can learn to overcome.
Absolutely, right? Because there's that detail of treating symptoms and then not addressing the fundamental issue, and you didn't have a full picture of what the deal was, but that was also kind of like a blessing in disguise so that you didn't identify with your perceived limits, right? Like, well, I have cystic fibrosis. That also comes along with I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this other thing because of this diagnosis. So you kind of dodged the bullet of identifying with those limits. So you were more likely to expend your effort and hit the real limits, which were a lot farther down the road than I might hurt myself. So you can't do anything.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I hate labels in just about everything, to the point where I don't know what my job title is right now. I don't know what it is. I know what I do. I know what I do, but I don't know what my job title is, and I don't know that my bosses do, or even the people that work for me. Um, but we all know what we do, and I think when you label something, and this goes back to that diagnosis, because if you were to label someone with a disease, you're absolutely right. Everything that goes along with that disease gets lumped into it, right? So, oh, well, he needs an inhaler and he can't breathe. And, Ryan is the kid with cystic fibrosis, right? So if he's the kid with cystic fibrosis, he's the kid that is constantly coughing. He's the kid who can't do the wind sprints. He's the kid who can't put on weight. Oh, he's skinny because of this. He can't run because of this. And while that may have some validity, it doesn't give you the opportunity to carve out your own lane. And not being able to define yourself is terrible. You want to be able to put your own label on yourself. You don't want to be defined by someone else. And I think that's the difficulty when there is, early diagnosis with disease, or even when people get pigeonholed in their career. Like, hey, Jonathan, you're the mind reader guy. Like, I know you want to do a podcast. I get it. Look, I know you can't sell anything, you can't market, but you can do magic tricks and read minds. Like, no, no, I'm so much more than a mind reader. I'm so much more than the guy that does kung fu. Like, I am Jonathan Pritchard. I am Ryan Shekell. I'm so much greater than the labels that others might want to put on me. So I think if you can stay broad with that label that you place on yourself and not even have it be a label, just be you, I think it's so much better.
Yeah. And also, that's a huge insight to the reward effort instead of the label. Because I grew up with friends. We were in the academically gifted group, and everybody that seemed to be rewarded for being smart or being whatever it is you're born as, that was how they came to see themselves. And then if there was anything that could potentially threaten that identity, that, oh, I might try something new and then fail at it, and then people won't think I'm smart. Therefore, I'm less likely to try new things. So therefore, you don't get the new experience to grow and continue being awesome. So the folks that were rewarded for their inherent abilities tended to not develop much beyond what they were given. If people were putting in effort and then rewarded for how hard they tried, like, okay, you got a D on your test. How hard did you try to study for it? Like, how much effort did you put into this? And be like, well, near zero. Like, well, you got the results of the effort you put in. So the focus on how much effort and dedication you bring to the table, I think, is a much better way to kind of cut things up instead of I am this way because I was born this way and therefore will always be this way. That's a dangerous track to go down, and focusing instead on what effort can I put in? What could I pursue? What can I create more skill at being? That's a much better focus.
Yeah, so let's talk about effort because I think this is something that's worth diving into a little bit. If you're going to put effort into something, effort is a conscious decision to direct energy at something, right? So if you're consciously directing energy towards a task, towards anything, you are placing value on that, right? So one of the things I like to think about is purpose, the purpose behind doing anything. And if you have purpose in what you're striving to do, whether it be just this overarching purpose in your life, and I know, you may read books by Simon Sinek, the Start with Why books, or um, it's a big self development topic. Is find your purpose, find your why, find your values, define your mission statement, your just cause. And I think if you truly take the time to find that purpose and to understand what is important to you, big picture in your life, then once you have that and you've decided what it is, then you understand where to direct your efforts, right? So now we've said, okay, effort is going to be this directed energy toward a purpose or a value. And you can tell how important that value is to someone based on the effort that goes into it. So, you're saying, well, you may have had some friends that, got D's in classes. Well, that's a direct correlation of they didn't value education or they didn't value that class or that grade. So you can actually kind of figure out someone's value based on the effort as well. And I like to think about this because, I was telling you, I have kids. I've got two young boys now, and we can talk about that story as well because I'm grateful to have kids after sharing my story with you, and my wife and I were fortunate enough to be able to do in vitro fertilization and be successful with two kids, and it's been the love of my life. But one of the things that I talk to my sons about, and I think it's really important, is if you value something in your life, if you want to be somebody, it goes back to that label. You can label yourself what you want to be. Now, you're not having someone label you. You're saying, I am the type of person that does this. And I use it a lot with them, like cleaning their rooms. Simple things, right? They're young kids. And I say, hey, you're the type of person that maintains a clean room. You're not a slob. That's the type of person you are. And I use that in my life as well. Sometimes cleaning my room. Like, I'm the type of person that cleans up after myself. I'm the type of person that does dishes. I'm the type of person that works out in the morning. Things that are important to me that align with my value system and that direct me towards my purpose, I will label myself as someone that does that because I understand that that label that I'm placing on myself actually helps me to continue along that path.
That is super useful. Super useful is to understand that with that label, with that box comes a whole bunch of behaviors along for the ride. And you can use that to good effect by programming yourself saying, I'm the kind of person that sees themselves this way, and that kind of person does these things. So I guess I better get to it. It sounds so stupid simple when you say it out loud, but it really is. It really is that simple.
Yeah, well, so what's your self talk like?
Mine is relentlessly positive. It's kind of difficult to find common ground with most people because mine has never been kind of down on myself. Like when I was an early teenager in that like that time frame, yeah, right? I was super awkward and like, oh, I'm so weird. And oh, why are people that way? And then in high school, I realized it's like, well, I'm going to need to speak up for myself because who else will? And I've got to live with me for the rest of my life. So if I want to keep good company, I better like who I'm spending time with. So all right, here we go. And from that point forward, it was just a yeah, what are we going to do today because we can do it kind of approach.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that that positive self-talk has helped you more so than having negative self-talk? Because I have this conversation with a lot of people, and it's just a question. It's like a stupid question that people are kind of like, we're sitting around like a bonfire having a drink, and I'm like, "What's your self-talk like?" All right, Ryan, whatever. But I've got this weird theory about self-talk that people who have self-talk generally have like a more positive demeanor and temperament, and I truly think that as long as it's harnessed well, I think it really helps in terms of achieving goals. But at the same time, I also understand that there's a lot of people out there that have super negative self-talk, and not negative to the point where it's like detrimental to their daily activities, right? And I think some people might have that, but like you hear stories about people who are like, I'm just hard on myself, and because I'm hard on myself, and because I'm constantly like yelling at myself, saying, "You got to do this, you got to do this," it drives me to get things done. So I'm always really curious to hear, like, talking to successful people, what is that self-talk? And I like to go back to an analogy of like running, because I've done a lot of running in the past couple of years. It's just something that's fresh in my mind. And when I'm at a hill, a big hill, and I'm in the middle of a run and I'm trying to run, what is going through my mind? And that's like what I like to ask. And inevitably someone's like, well, I hate running, so I'm never going to be on a hill. But my self-talk when I'm running up a hill is, come on, Ryan, let's go. You could do this. You got this. No one else is out here doing this. It's early in the morning. Like, you got cystic fibrosis. You can't even breathe and you're running up this hill. You got this. Come on. Right? It's really positive, kind of like what you're saying. And then I talk to like other people and they're like, oh, I hit that hill. And my self talk is like, come on, you lazy piece of crap. Like, you better get up that hill. And it's so funny to hear the difference in what works for people. But I think the most important thing is harnessing it, right? So whether you're optimistic or pessimistic, at least take time with yourself. Like you're saying, I mean, you're your own best friend in a way. Your conversation with yourself is the longest conversation you're going to have with anyone. So just take that time to really understand how to manage your self talk. Sometimes you have to listen to it because it's encouraging, and sometimes you have to ignore it and say, I understand that my self talk right now is not pointing me in the direction it needs to go.
Yeah, it's kind of like a battery has a positive pole and a negative pole, and they both need to work together to have the current flow, right? And to be useful. In high school, I was on the cross country team and just absolutely awful at it. At every single meet that we would go to, I was in the 51st percentile, right? Just like dead middle every single time. And I would on hills be like, you eat hills for breakfast, right? Because nobody else likes hills. So I'm gonna accelerate. And maybe that's why I gassed out too early every single time. And and for me, a big part of it is that I'm worried that the way that I think about and to myself will influence whether or not I make good choices about myself or not. So if there's a 0.01% chance that the positive or negative slant of my self-talk will influence me in that direction, and I've got 1,000 opportunities a day for that influence to be exerted. So even if it's the slightest little nudge, there are enough of them every day that the cumulative effect could be super drastic. So even if there's a 0.001% chance that it might be real, that's enough of a Pascal's wager that I don't want to harness the dark powers of the Sith for good ends. I'm one of those weirdos that likes to think there's the right thing to do and the right way to do it. Both of those need to be managed properly, because otherwise you get into the ends justify the means, and then you start executing certain means that are not good, right? So that's why I've been super careful about consciously engaging in the power of negative to positive ends.
Yeah, and but I think it's important that you're aware of that, and that's the key. Because if you're not aware of that, then you don't know how to manage it. And at the same time, I have a feeling just from our couple conversations that we've had that you have a very clear kind of North Star, right? Like you know where you want to go. And that's the other key, right? Because if you know where you want to go, you have purpose, and it goes back to that purpose and meaning. So cliche, but truly, if you have purpose and you know your direction, then all you have to do is say, well, does this action align with the direction that I'm looking to go? And I truly believe the ends never justify the means, ever. I think it's so bad as like a sales guy, but I'm so process oriented in a lot of ways, and it's gotten me in trouble in terms of like personality tests and stuff because um, 'cause I'm not the type of person that's going to do anything to get a sale. Well, okay, maybe that's not the best thing for a sales guy to say. And then I argue, you know what? All the best salespeople have the same mentality. They may come about a different way, but it's a value. It's a value add. It's not a sale. And ultimately, if you have a strong relationship, if you provide value on a daily basis, an hourly basis, you build a great relationship. Then you know what? People are going to want to do business with you, and people are going to value your honesty, your integrity, and then now your means have justified your end, right? Because you're doing things the right way, and while it may not be on the timeline that's expected of you, sometimes hopefully you can speed it up when you need to. You're going to get to where you want to be because you're taking all the right steps along the way to get there.
Exactly. And also, if you have that proactive consultant approach of how best can I serve you to find the best answer for your current problem, and you identify I'm not the best answer for your current problem, well, then over here might be. And then they like, oh, that I've never heard that from anybody before. Okay. But then that other person helps them understand that you actually were the best option. Then they're coming back instead of you trying to close that deal now when they're not in a good situation. Then you wouldn't be the best fit because they had to go to that other dude first in order to be ready for your services, right? So if you're playing that long time horizon, looking out for what's best for them, it comes back 6, 8 months later. They're like, hey, it wasn't a good fit at the time. And you told me, and it was tough for me to hear that. But, I'm now in a much better position. That's awesome when deals you've said no to for one reason or the other come back to you instead of trying to get the yes immediately, then burn the relationship forever and engender bad will to all their friends that they're going to badmouth you to, right? Like it's just what time frame do you want to measure this at? The longer you take, the better like proactive consultant approach
Yeah,
gets.
what's really cool. What's really cool about that is by saying no and directing them to someone else, the fact that you've had that relationship with them and you're pointing them in that direction, you were the best option, right? Well, it wasn't maybe the sale. You were the best option to have that conversation with because then you directed them towards where they needed to be, and that integrity and authenticity of that conversation and that interaction, they needed that. They needed that. Whether it was directing them somewhere else or doing business with you, they may just say, "Hey, I don't even care. This like that was honest. Like, let's just figure something out." And once you can cultivate that type of relationship, yeah, you are the best person. And I think you have to have that optimism that I talk about to understand that when you're doing things the right way, and you have authenticity and integrity, then you can achieve anything. You can. You may be physically limited, right? You may be cognitively limited. And we all start at different points. I can recognize that. But you can get to where you want to be. You have to find the process and the steps it takes to get there. And once you define that, you just can relentlessly work that process to get to that end point. And I think being authentic and having integrity is a huge part of that.
Absolutely. So for the working out side of your life, right? Like a lot of people have to browbeat themselves into working out and be like, I know I should. What's that saying? They should all over themselves, right? Just like, I should be doing this. I should be doing that. What percentage of that for you is just recognizing, listen, man, I should be dead. So getting to go run wild up hills, you know what? I'm not going to miss a day because I shouldn't be here right now. Right. So what percentage of your kind of physical exercise regimen is more of a celebration of life versus this is what I have to do to stay healthy because I should be doing this?
Let's go 60-40. 60-40. I'm going to go 60-40. I enjoy it. 40, I should be dead. And I want to make this clear because I think this is really important. I place a high value on physical and mental health in terms of success. I think it's one of the most impactful, important things that you can do for yourself is to take physical care of your body, eat healthy, get enough sleep, read. I think it's a synergy between everything that really truly drives you to success overall in your life. So to answer your question, oftentimes when I don't want to work out, which is a lot, 60% of the days, I don't want to work out, and some days I don't. I give into it. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. 60% of the days I don't want to work out, and I have to tell myself, you know what? You got young kids, you got a wife, you got to take care of yourself. You're going to feel better like when you're 60, 70, 80 years old if you work out now. And that's that delayed gratification that everybody struggles with. No one wants to do something now that's good, they're going to benefit later. So, and the other 40% is I really enjoy rigorous physical activity. I think it's a lot of fun, and I think the runner's high. And I don't just run. I do a lot of like cross training. I do weightlifting. I don't do any martial arts, but I do a lot of different activities that kind of keep things fresh. And it truly is. It's a meditation in a lot of ways. My mind is going a lot during the day. If I can shut it off for an hour to just focus on getting a task done that has nothing to do with the rest of the day that needs to get done, I embrace that. I embrace that. And because of that, I also value getting to bed earlier. I don't want to stay up until 11, 12 at night because I understand that 5 o'clock sucks when you're up at midnight, So look, my alarm goes off and I turn it off sometimes, but I also understand that if I don't do the things that are difficult now, then things are going to be difficult in the future. And it's a truth, and I will call it a truth. It's a truth that I've come to terms with, and that I think a lot of people ignore. And there's some hacks that kind of get you into the gym, but there's no hack for valuing your own health and wellness.
It's kind of like I can show you what to do. I can't make you want to do it. That's got to come from yourself.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
and it's funny because a lot of people say like, "I don't have time." I understand I really truly understand the argument. There's a lot of really busy people, and I understand that I'm fortunate that I can carve out time, and I have a busy schedule, but I am fortunate that I can carve out time. I don't work 4 jobs, 18 hours a day. Um, But my answer to people who say, like, I don't have time is you don't have time not to. Like, it's opportunity cost. If you're investing, right, and you say, oh, well, I missed out on GameStop, like that was your opportunity cost. Well, if you choose not to work out, you're missing out on GameStop every day. Like, there's no other time. So cut something out. Cut something out. I know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger famously said when he came here from Austria, I believe it was, and people were saying like, "Oh, how do you have time for this? You're taking the acting classes, you're bodybuilding 5 or 6 hours a day, you're learning English, you're working construction." And he said, you find time, and if you say you have to sleep, sleep faster. Like, just sleep faster. It's like, as simple as that. And yeah, 30 minutes is 30 minutes. I could find 30 minutes in anyone's schedule that you could work out in.
Yep, exactly. So walk me through the 50K ultra marathon, right? Not just a marathon, it's marathon and then some more. My wife has run something like 11 marathons, and I'm a wonderful support animal. Like I can hold stuff and be at the end zone. Um, that's stunning to me. So what was it about doing the ultra marathon that made you say, yeah, let me do that?
So I've never ran a 5K in my life up until 2 years ago. I've never ran, ever. I played baseball in college, and as a pitcher, we would run to recover. So we would run a couple miles here or there. We ran these things called poles, and that's where you run from one foul pole to the other over and over and over again. And the more you run, the more the lactic acid kind of flows out of your arm, helps you recover faster. You could throw sooner, right? So that was my running regimen until I was 35 years old, and I really put off running. I didn't like it. I could not run 3 miles. That was about 3 miles when I started training. That was about my threshold. And the reason, it goes back to that purpose. It's like a broken record with me sometimes, but the purpose is important because I wanted to do something physically demanding that related to the disease that I was overcoming. So I had to say, it's real. I have cystic fibrosis. I want to do something that will inspire other people to know that they can do anything they want. And if I have a lung disease and they've been talking to me about a double lung transplant because I can't get my lung function up, well, the most impactful thing that I think I can do is a long endurance event like an ultra marathon. And it started with just wanting to do a marathon. It's been one of the things where I got so much respect for people who can put themselves through that. The training, the running. 26.2 miles is a long way to run. It's so far. And if anybody has ever done like a half marathon or a 10K, when you go for a run at your house and you go 5 miles, you realize how far 5 miles is. You go far. It's really far. So I just said, I'm going to do an ultra marathon because it's something that's meaningful to me. Some people who have inspired me have done them. And I wanted to have that same impact on other people. So that was my why. That was my purpose. And I told my wife, and she was like, yeah, do it. It sounds awesome. I'll help. I'll run with you when you want. I'll run with you on the race day if you want for part of it as a pacer, because anything over a marathon, you can have pacers, right? So the last half of the run, people can run with you. And they can't carry anything for you, but they can run with you and just kind of keep you motivated. So I sign up and I train for 10 months. And over that 10 months, my lungs get better and better and better, mainly the medication. But I'm also just feeling great, And October comes, 10 months into my training. I've ran 1,000 miles in training, and I'm ready to take on this run. Well, 2 weeks before the run, COVID is still going. We thought the race was going to happen because it's socially distanced beyond belief in an ultra marathon, and the beautiful state of New York says nope, can't do it, no race. So here I am. I've raised $5,000 for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and I'm thinking, well, I'm running this race. So I tell my wife, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I drove down to the starting line. My mom met me down at the starting line. My wife came with the supplies that I had packed in the car, and I set off. I set off to run 50 kilometers alone with my headphones and my hydration vest. And the longest training run that I had before the race was 26.2 miles. It was a marathon, and I did that, and I was pretty confident. My neighborhood, the area that I live, is somewhat hilly. I think my marathon had about 1,000 feet of elevation gain, maybe 800, which is still pretty good. This ultra marathon was closer to 2,000. It wasn't mountains, but there were some big hills. There were some big hills in the Finger Lakes, and I underestimated that. I should have done a little bit more training on hills and probably some more sprints, squats and deadlifts. And I took off, and I was on a good pace. And I met my brother and my sister-in-law and my niece were there with a little sign at 7 miles, go Ryan, go, and gave him a big hug and a kiss and took a picture. And there's no aid stations, so I'm just carrying my water with me. And I get to mile 13. I'm at this top of this big hill. And I'm like, okay. And I'm a little bit behind the pace I wanted to be at. And I start running down this hill. It's like a 2 mile downhill jog at this point. And it was steep. I got to the bottom of that hill, mile 15, 16, and my quads were just toast. They were done. I couldn't do anything. I drank all my water. 16 miles in, I got 16 to go out of water, and ate all my little gel packs and everything. And I'm like, I'm starting to get dizzy. I'm like, this is not good. Not good. I'm pretty out of it. So I call my wife, and she was supposed to meet me at mile 20. And she was sitting there. She's already sitting there waiting. She's got my mother-in-law and my kids, and they're all ready. They got replenishments from where I was going to have more water at that point. And I call, and I'm like, honey, you got to come closer. I haven't seen a person or an aid station in 16 miles. I have nothing to drink. I can't move. So she comes a mile closer. I get to mile 20 and or 19, and she sees me, and she's like, oh no, this is not good. And I just switch out my water. I eat a quick apple and orange and switch out, I take my shirt off because I'm getting so hot. And at this point, I'm looking up the biggest hill on the whole course, mile 19. And I was like, I'm going to walk this hill. I'm going to walk this hill because I can't go. I was like, but I need you, please. Can you go to the grocery store and get water? Because I'm going to run out again. So she's like freaking out. She drops the kids off somewhere with mom and mother-in-law. And she's like, this is now a full-time job for the next 2, 3, 4 hours to try to get Ryan through this. And she got a case of water. She met me 4 more miles in. And, at this point, I was in bad shape. Mile 20 was rough, and I started walking. And for the next 3 miles, mile 19 to 22, I was doing a very slow interval walk jog. And it was painful. I was so cramped up. And I didn't have a coach. I didn't get a coach to teach me how to do this. I just started running. So I'm texting and calling people that I know that have done triathlons and marathons. I'm like, how do I get these cramps to go away? And they're like, well, eat the salt, but don't have too much, and have the water. So anyway, I get to mile 22, and Lisa's waiting for me with water, and I sit in the back of her car, and I pound 4 bottles of water. I eat half a bag of pretzels and an apple, and she's massaging my legs. And I get this text from my friend who's done a bunch of triathlons, and she says, you better get your ass out of that car and start moving, or you will never get up off your butt again. So I did, and that replenishment and that 10 minutes that I took in the car really helped. And I ran the next 5 miles, met Lisa again, and then she was there again with water and massage and pretzels. And the last 3 to 4 miles of that race, kind of coming in the home stretch, that's really where the satisfaction came in. And I was like, you know what, I'm doing this, I'm running, and I'd mix a little walking in, but I was going hard. I was a little disappointed because my time wasn't great, but I understood that finishing was the goal. And no matter what, I was going to finish that race. If it was going to take me 12 hours and I was going to have to get a headlamp, I was going to finish that race. It was just the purpose. It was the goal, and I had to do it. And I showed up at the finish line, and my family's there, my kids are there, and it was a beautiful thing. And then I sat down and had a big dark beer and a steak, and it was phenomenal. But I was really proud of it, and it goes back to what you're talking about of just overcoming adversity and knowing that it can be done, and understanding that like there's a process, and if you follow the process, you can do anything. I was more proud of the 1,000 miles I ran in 10 months. I thought I broke my foot in the middle of it. I took 3 weeks off of running in the middle of training for an ultra marathon because I couldn't walk. I was non weight bearing on a foot that I thought I broke, and it turns out it wasn't a broken foot. But I biked like 600 miles in those 3 weeks, understanding that my goal was to do this, and nothing was going to stop me. If I had to walk it at that point, I was gonna. So you got to understand the process. You have to understand your why, and then you just have to relentlessly work towards it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Just, well, I'm going to do a marathon, but if you're going to go big or go home, let's go biggest. Let's do an ultra marathon. And it's kind of nice to know that even like there's this weird part of my brain that's like, even though you've had such an uphill battle already through your whole life, that thing wasn't easy, right? Like you still got a lot of grit to you, right? Of
Yeah.
going, well, this was brutal, and even though you've put in a lot of effort, it wasn't a breeze, and you still made it through. So
Well,
that's
nothing is worth doing if it's easy. When was the last time you did something easy and you're like, oh, good job, Jonathan?
yeah,
Right? I,
no.
I mean, truly, I can't think of anything I've ever done that was easy that I was proud of. Anything. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think right now, and I can't. Going back to the choice of the ultra marathon, and this is it's I don't think I've ever told anyone this story actually, but I chose the ultra marathon because it was going to be hard and it was running, but it also the location had a lot of meaning to me, and it's a interesting story. So I was looking at marathons, Rochester, New York. Okay, that's what I was going to run a marathon, and I was like, oh, the Rochester Marathon, there's a bunch of them. It's just like, okay, well, it's a little road race, and it has no meaning to me. And then as I'm scrolling through there, I've always had this in the back of my mind, the ultra marathon, and I see it's called the Can-Am 50, and it's on Canandaigua Lake, and that's where this ultra marathon was. I said, oh, that I love Canandaigua Lake. I grew up with a lake house on Canandaigua Lake. My parents had a shack that's been in my family since my great grandpa got it. So I've had this small little shack that I grew up going to every weekend of my life in the summers on Canandaigua Lake. It's a really meaningful place. It's my favorite place in the world. And it was in my dad's family forever, and my mom lives there now. And I said, this is really meaningful. And at the time, my dad, who was one of my best friends, died of brain cancer a couple months prior. So it was really meaningful to me to have this because I wanted to do it for him too. Because he was such a role model to me that I wanted to have him be a part of me. And we scattered his ashes in the lake and everything. So I knew he was there with me. And I knew that he was going to accompany me on this endeavor and this run. So that was really meaningful. So much so. And it's crazy the way the world goes around. I mean, I don't know what your feelings on not karma, but coincidence, I guess, is. When I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at 18 years old, I went to the University of Rochester to get my first treatment. There was a children's hospital, a part of the university, and the fourth floor of the University of Rochester campus at the hospital was the children's floor, which is where they put all the cystic fibrosis kids. Because like I said, most people with cystic fibrosis die early. It's mainly kids, and they're mainly very sick. That was my floor. I spent a lot of time there. I would go in for a week or two every summer and get IV medications, treatments, lung therapy. and just get worked on to be optimized. Fourth floor, University of Rochester. The year that I got the medication that changed my life, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. Do you know where the hospice floor and the brain cancer floor is at the University of Rochester? It's the fourth floor. The same rooms that I spent time in being diagnosed that changed my life were the last walls that my father saw before he died. And it really came full circle in terms of just the impact that he had on me, the connection that I had with him, in bringing that into this race and having that meaning. And I carried his ashes with me in my fanny pack too. So it was really meaningful to do that. And I think it goes to the power of that purpose and family and having those role models and doing things for them.
Dude, thank you for sharing that. That's that's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's a great dude. You'd have loved him.
it's awesome. I love it. Well, I think that's about as good a place to stick the landing as any, right? So, dude, thank you for sharing your stories and your purpose and your mission in life. So, for the folks that are all about it, where is it that people should be finding you to connect?
Yeah, so I'm all over the social medias, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, all those cool things. You know what the kids are doing these days. Honestly, the best way to find me is Facebook and Instagram. You could find me at Ryan Shekell, or you could find me at my podcast page, Every Breath Counts Podcast, and that is on Facebook and Instagram, as well as the website ryanshekel.com and Every Breath Counts Podcast.com. And those should be going to the same web page. So you could find me at either one of those. And yeah, look, I've got a podcast that Jonathan so graciously joined me on. And I look to speak with other people who have achieved massive success in their life, understand how and why they achieved that success, and just really get to the bottom of optimizing, your mind, your body, your career, and your life. And it's something that's always fascinated me. And I love talking to people like yourself, Jonathan, and getting to the bottom of really what makes successful people tick.
I love it. We'll, of course, have all those links in the show notes and all that stuff that every podcast guest says. So that's it for the live stream. So thank you, the folks that have been watching this live. You're getting a sneak peek at the upcoming shows. So good on you for that. And find me at ELITE.University. That's ELITE.University. And that'll be it for the live stream. If I can remember what buttons. There we go. Mute that. Awesome. So the stream is done. Let me hit stop